Hello there, thrill seekers. And for today's Monday Moldy Oldie, I am going to present to you a movie that was made, a short film that was made about my trip to Finland in 2009 by a guy named CK, who I haven't seen since then, but he put together this film of my tour of Finland, and I thought it was neat. He put it up on his YouTube channel many years ago, and it's been up there, so some of you may have seen this already, but this is the first time I'm putting it up on my video channel, as far as I can remember. I don't think I've put it up here before. But anyway, this is the film, and it's kind of CK's view of my European tour. It's not quite the movie I would put together of my European tour, probably, but I didn't put together a movie. He did. And I appreciate it, and I like it, and it's a bit longer than my usual thing. And also, in order not to interrupt the flow of the film, I'm going to put my donation info down here right now. That's hardcorezen.info/donate, hardcorezen.info/donate. You can find my PayPal and Patreon links, and that's how I make my living, and I appreciate your donations, but this is, as always, given for free, so you don't got to donate if you don't want to donate. And there, we got that out of the way. Now, let's look at CK's movie of me in Finland in 2009. So I don't know, the people with the cameras in here think that somebody important must be here, but I don't know.
Silloin kun Basan puhuksi julkaista Hardcore Zeni Suomessakin 2006, niin se herätti silloin semmoisen pienimuotoisen suosion ja sai ihmisen taas kiinnostua Zenistä ja muusta. Sitten me kelattiin, että oi vitsi, että tähän voisi olla mukava saada itse Brad tänne Suomeen, ja sitten mä aloittiin sitä vähitellen puuhaamaan.
I never in my life expected to come to Finland.
Actually, I'd like to know what are you doing? Because I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm in space now.
Yeah, me too.
Nice to meet you, Harry.
Brad on meidän Dogen Sanghan periaatteessa pääopettaja, vaikka hän ei sitä niin virallisesti halukkaan itseään niin kuin nähdä pääopettajana, mutta sitä hän kumminkin on.
Nishijima Roshi had an organization that he called Dogen Sangha. And it was never quite clear exactly what Dogen Sangha was. As long as he was teaching it, Dogen Sangha was him and whoever he happened to be teaching, whoever his students were. And there was never like a list of members or a list of rules or anything like that.
Is the Godzilla in the shirt visible? I guess you want it visible or not? Well, it could be because it's one part of it.
I love Japanese monster movies like Godzilla, these kind of things. And so I decided I'd see if I could get a job at one of these companies, and I managed to get a job at one of these companies, moved me to Tokyo, and I found a Zen teacher in Tokyo named Budo Nishijima who actually taught Zen, taught zazen. My question was, what is Dogen Sangha International? And he was still sort of vague about it. It's this organization which is just a group of people who sort of have a common interest in Dogen and a common interest in the practices. Whenever I see a picture of me doing zazen, it just looks, this is what I do. He asked me to become the leader of it, and I very reluctantly said yes. And it became a kind of a problem. There were certain members of Dogen Sangha International who thought I was too pornographic or too weird or whatever.
Yeah.
No, because that's the one you print. And one of those people I managed to have a conversation with, and he eventually understood what I had in mind. You probably don't print that. He was okay. The other person decided to leave Dogen Sangha entirely and form his own group. Prepare for interviews? I don't do anything, so I just kind of hope for the best. I'm not so intimidated by it anymore as I was when I first started. So everybody here has done zazen for at least 15 years or so, right? Okay, good.
Just started last Sunday.
Oh, okay, good. Except for this guy. But I have no intention of trying to control people or tell them what to believe or tell them what to do. and a lot of people have said, a lot of people who hear that give me all this pressure and say, well, you have to tell them, you have to lead this organization, you have to hold it like this, and you're going to have to make it, you have to. You know, and I get very excited. I've had these conversations with I can't tell you how many people who get very excited that I have to do it the way you do an organization. And my response to that is why? Why? It's been functioning up until now as this very loose affiliation of people, and I don't see any reason to change that. I'd rather walk away from it than change it. Leave Dogen Sangha if it ever becomes a giant corporate religious institution, because that's not its intention.
Traditionally, you're sitting in the full lotus, but I think most people have trouble doing that. So you can do like half lotus, or you can do that half-assed lotus. It's just, I say it again and again, you have to watch what kind of pain. If the pain is coming from your knee joints, then you probably should do something. But if the pain is coming from here or here in the muscles of the legs, then that's just okay. You know, that's just the muscles going, stop it, you know. This practice kind of allows you to come into contact with the, I hate to say the present moment because it's so cliche, but the present moment, you know, what other word is there for it? In a way that nothing else ever did for me personally. And the hands go like so. The thing that stopped me doing Buddhist practice on occasion was getting too interested in Buddhism. Because I would be going, this Buddhist practice, so I start reading books about Buddhism, and they go, enlightenment. And I'd be going, well, I'm sitting here, I'm not getting enlightenment. The main thing to do is you want to keep your spine straight, so that you're kind of balancing on your spine. So you're not holding up you're stretching a little bit, but not using a lot of muscle to hold up your body. You know, I was doing all the things that people do in going out and playing rock shows and doing all this and going to college and all this stuff. So the mind gets very, very active. And the zazen practice seemed to help stop some of the extra activity that was going on in my mind, in my brain all the time. So whenever I would give it up, and you kind of sway back and forth to find the spot where it's balanced, and then just sit there, and your eyes are open, and you're looking at the wall or at something that's not very interesting. Then that level of noise in my head would just start getting louder and louder and louder, and it was funny because it was probably the same as I was before I started doing the practice, but I was now noticing it. And then we'll sit for 25 minutes, and don't worry about what you're thinking of. If you find yourself thinking too much, just fix your posture. So I just go back and start doing the practice again, and that helped. And we'll ring a bell once to end, and when we end, you just get up again and do the same thing, bowing to the cushion, bowing away from the cushion, and just stand like this. And when I see everybody is standing, then we'll all bow together. There's all kinds of extra stuff that's going on that doesn't really help. And if you can get that to quiet down a little bit, everything you do becomes much easier and much clearer. And that has been tremendously useful. I never set out with this idea to become a Buddhist, and I especially didn't set out with an idea to become a Buddhist teacher, because you have to wear these silly clothes. And I don't really like wearing, apologies to those of you who are wearing these clothes. I'm not very fond of them. They're hot and they're awkward. One of the hardest things if you do the zazen practice to understand or to accept, and this is even now, after doing it for as long as I have, often hard for me to accept, is that there is no goal to it. There's just no goal. So this is it is supposed to be a representation of the clothes that Buddha wore and represent the simplicity of Buddha and his teachings. Like, you'll notice that people wearing this stuff will be standing like this.
And that's not because they're tight asses. It's because if you don't stand like this, the whole thing falls apart and just, you know, it looks lousy. When you wear it, you're supposed to put it on your head, which looks silly, and then do this chant, Daizai Geru Fuku Muso Fukudene Hibu Nyorai Kyo Kodo Shoshujo. And the English version of that that's usually chanted in the US is something like, as we pledge our souls to Satan. Satan is our guide and our teacher. Great robe of liberation, a field beyond form and emptiness, wearing the Buddha's teachings, we free all beings, like that. People who do zazen for a long time and go, well, that guy got angry, and then he should not get angry, he's been doing zazen for years. But you don't know what that person would be like if they didn't do zazen. And as far as like anger is concerned, anger for me is like not that I never become angry, but that I hold on to it a lot less. So when I come, I'm glad you like this. I'm just going to speak to you from that. You know, when I do become angry, I tend not to grab it and hold it and play with it and, you know, make it a part of my personality. I sort of get angry and then usually can move on. And sometimes it's harder to move on than other times, depending on what the source of the anger is and the circumstances and so on. But it doesn't become this hard thing usually. No, but I feel a little less silly wearing this, but I still feel like an employee of McDonald's or something. You know, it's like because it is a kind of a name tag. So I've had these discussions with Nishijima Roshi, and for some reason he still is interested in having me be the head of his organization, even though I just don't like wearing this. Generally it'll have the verse, which is the verse that you chant when you're putting it on, and then it has the day that I took, that I did my Jukai ceremony, and then it has Nishijima's signature here, and then it has my fake Buddhist name here, which is Odo Ben A.
Do you use it ever?
No, I don't. It means way of responsiveness, a responding way. As Odo is response and way, and Ben A is hero of study. I don't know why hero of study. I think it was the only thing he could come up with that had a B in it. Real compassion is just moment by moment action. It's doing, and it also includes supposedly selfish action like doing zazen practice, because that helps make you more stable so that when you go out and act in the world, you can do that action with a clear mind and a clear, we say body and mind are the same, so a clear mind and a clear body.
Hei, tervetuloa hyvä yleisö katsomaan Espoosien harvinaista dokumenttia punk-liikkeestä Clevelandissa 80-luvulla.
Thanks. Thank you for coming to see the film, and I hope you enjoy it. It's a film about a segment of the punk rock scene that really nobody probably would even think was worth documenting, which was the punk rock scene in Cleveland and Akron, Ohio. Very small. Nobody within the scene ever became really famous, but I thought that it was kind of important to tell the story of this of these groups and these people and how much it influenced our lives, and how I think it was kind of a part of a very wide global movement. So I'm glad you came to see it, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you. Instead of just songs that were sort of faster than regular punk rock, these songs were just blasts of noise that didn't seem to have any touchstone, anything I could recognize as music. They were just sort of like, and then finished. When my publishers told me, we sold your book to a foreign country, I'm like, oh, really? What foreign country did you sell the book to? Finland. Oh. Finland, really? You know, I knew there was a Monty Python song, but... And then, you know, a little pause, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and over. You know, and every song was like this. And I thought, wow, this is the most amazing band I've ever seen, you know? Because they just don't make any sense at all. But that's all. I had no idea about Finnish culture or anything like that, and it's really been very cool to see this and to have, you know, I'm so glad to have the film shown here. And when I first started finding out there were other Buddhists writing things online, I'm like, wow, Buddhism online, you know, click, 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 and I started looking at some of the stuff and I was going, oh, this is really bad, you know? Most of the stuff I encountered, some of it was good, but some of it was just horrible. You know, a lot of people arguing and a lot of people trying to be, I'm more Buddhist than you. Dogen said in 1200 BC that, you know, whatever they said, you know, that you are wrong. Click. You know, and then the other guy said, well, Dogen said in 1204 BC that you are wrong. Click. You know, and it just goes back and forth. One thing that made me popular among a certain crowd, but very unliked among a certain other crowd, was the fact that I started writing a regular column for a website called Suicide Girls, which is, Suicide Girls does not like to call itself a porn website, but it's sort of a porn website. You know, there are pictures of naked girls on the website, right?
Because you're a Zen monk now.
Yeah, sort of.
And I know punk guys, and they're not very monkey, and I'd like to know more about them.
But they'd come to me and ask me if I would mind writing. Well, first it was a weekly column, and then it became a monthly column about spiritual matters, I guess is the way they put it. I kind of felt like becoming a Zen monk was the most punk rock thing I could possibly do. I see it as very much connected. I think that's kind of, when I discovered Zen, it was sort of like they took that same attitude to the ultimate end. But writing for Suicide Girls made a certain segment of the Buddhist community a little unhappy, because here I was. Well, a lot of the things I do make segments of the Buddhist community unhappy.
Vasen, oikea, vasen ja bien.
I should qualify when I say I'm a monk, because there are two, because I am, but there are two sort of ways to become a monk in the Zen tradition, and one involves going through a temple to a training period where you do, like, I don't know, 3 or 7 years of training. Think the thought of non-thinking, and then somebody asks, what is the thought of non-thinking? And he says, it's different from thinking. So, and he doesn't say any more than that. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And the other way is somebody who has gone through that process now has permission to make anybody else a monk in any way she or he chooses to do so. It's kind of up to you to figure out what the state of non-thinking is. At one point, my second teacher was named Gudo Nishijima, said he wanted to ordain me as a monk. And I just thought that was crazy, you know, really. But he felt like I'd gone through the necessary training just by virtue of having done the practice for that many years. It's just part of my daily life. For me, it's sort of noticing that thoughts aren't a continuous stream. If you're actually sitting there for a long time, you start to notice that thoughts will kind of go in, I don't know, a good metaphor for it is a sort of a wave. It sort of builds up and builds up and builds up and becomes a thought, and then it drops down again. And you know, when it's in this low point, there's not really any sort of thought. There's no conscious thought, and then the conscious thought sort of arises again and does its thing. And if you're really, you know, in trouble, that process is going like this, and you know, it's very difficult. So being a monk for me just involves doing this meditation practice every day and going to a lot of Zen retreats and things where you kind of live a more what people think of as a monk's life for like a week at a time. But even when it's going like this, there's always little periods where the thought just kind of stops. And what I've found to be useful is just to kind of notice that and stay with it as much as possible.
Up at 4:30 in the morning and you're doing your meditation all day, and even when you're not doing meditation, everything else you're doing is supposed to be done with the same kind of attitude, including eating.
But if you try to force it, if you try to, clamp down on your thoughts, that doesn't work.
You're sitting there on your cushion, and you're usually facing the wall, but during meal times you get to face away from the wall, and then you take turns every day within the group, so everybody has a turn at being a server.
Another way to explain the thought of not thinking is that it's kind of like thoughts go on, but you no longer pay attention to them. They become less important.
Whoever's turn it is being a server, it's usually 2 or 3 people, come around and serve the other monks the food, and you're sitting in your meditation posture. You have to, before you get to eat, you have to do all these chants and things, and then you get to eat.
Shunryu Suzuki has this line. He says thoughts are the secretions of the brain. The way like stomach acid is the secretion of your stomach. It's just something that your brain does when it's functioning properly. So there's no need to try to stop it.
But at the same time, it's not, all the rules and things that exist aren't just arbitrary. They are created to try to make this practice possible.
You also realize that the thoughts themselves, the content of the thoughts, isn't really important. They'll just go on, and at some level you can be thinking whatever you want and still remain fully engaged in zazen practice, because the thinking is just another noise that's happening inside.
So for me, that's what being a monk has been like, and also it's coming to Finland and doing a bunch of talks about being a monk. That's another part of the job, and I've written books about it. And
I got into it because I found this practice useful, and whatever I manifest as a Buddhist teacher is just about about the practice and how the practice has influenced me, and what it's done, and also the mistakes I've made. In this practice, you'll experience a lot of things, and one of the things you might experience is a kind of state of bliss or euphoria, or this kind of wonderful thing. But any good Zen teacher will tell you not to stick with that. If euphoria and bliss happens, you just kind of allow it, and you can kind of enjoy it too. There's no shame or sin in enjoying a sort of euphoric state during zazen. Once those euphoric states pass, they always pass, then you get into this I wish I was in euphoric state again. I was in a euphoric state 15 minutes ago, and now I feel like shit. And that's the problem right there, is that mind that says, I wish I was somewhere else that I'm not right now. Any sort of euphoria you might get, or good feeling you get from the practice, comes from those times when you're able to drop any preference, any idea that I would rather be this than that. So ironically, if you actually want your euphoria to continue, the best thing to do is not want your euphoria to continue. And it's impossible to consciously do that, because if you try to consciously will yourself not to want something, it's like, somebody says, don't think of a pink elephant. Immediately you're thinking of pink elephant. And I knew from my experience and from some of the things that had gone on in my zazen practice and some of the things I'd come to understand, that even if you have some kind of experience of deep understanding of things, that doesn't fix everything, and that doesn't make you magic, and it doesn't make you a god. Because some of these experiences can make you feel like you've figured out everything. Like you are God himself, and you got it all figured out, and now I'm just going to go tell the world about it. There had been some scandals and things that had gone on in the world of spiritual teaching, specifically in Zen, where it came to light that certain Zen teachers had sex. If you have the luxury of having somebody who may have trained under a teacher who'd actually gone through those experiences, it kind of helps to ground you. And when people found out that these Zen teachers had sex, they would get very excited and angry and upset and their dreams were shattered. And their whole world fell apart, and people had huge recriminations, and horrible things happened, and fights, and whole communities of people disbanded, and all this stuff happened. That I'd had some of these experiences, and it was a big shock to bring them to my teacher and tell him about this most beautiful experience in which I understood every goddamn thing there is to understand, and having him say, I remember at one point he said, "You work for a company that makes cartoons, don't you?" I just told him this incredibly freaky, wonderful experience of union with the universe and whatever, and he thought it sounded like a cartoon, And really, in retrospect, it did sound like a cartoon. But at the time, I was very convinced by it, If you're a mountain climber, you climb up a mountain and climb and climb and climb and get tired and you work hard and you get to the top of the mountain and you see the view there. And if you just wanted to see what the view was from the top of a mountain, you could rent a video, very easily. But that's not at all the same thing as climbing the mountain yourself. And also, the climbing of the mountain doesn't just include the top of the mountain as an experience. And in some ways, it's not that the goal is to be on top of the mountain, because you also have to climb down the mountain. So there's a whole experience there in which the view from the top is just one thing that happens. So that's kind of what about this zazen practice is that you do this hard practice, and sometimes it's very difficult and painful and so on. But at some point you might get a glimpse of something pretty amazing. But that pretty amazing thing is just one part of the experience of zazen. There's a whole other thing to it, and to negate the rest of it and say that the top of the mountain is the goal is not a good understanding of mountain climbing. It's not a good understanding of Zen practice. You're just holding this posture, and it's very sort of neutral. And that is the dignified behavior of Buddha, is what they call that. So that's all you're really trying to do, is hold the posture. And it should be a state without intention, but even saying that, everybody comes to the practice with some kind of intention. There's not a single person who has no intention at all. But still, you just put that aside. He sat there under the Bodhi tree, determined to find him the truth. He could no longer abide by the comforts that he had known in his youth. And when Mara came, he said, "Get the heck out of here. I got the Dharma to find. I can't do that when you are near. I don't want nothing to cloud up my mind." I like the way Nishijima Roshi phrases it. He says that his regard of Gautama Buddha is that Gautama Buddha was kind of a genius, the way Einstein or some of these people were a genius, or Stephen Hawking or somebody who came up with something unique that nobody had really done before, that was very important for the world. Buddha was a good old boy, my friend. Buddha was a good old boy. I think I'll say it once again. Buddha was a good old boy. And if you feel that your life is dukkha, no way to find joy, just remember this, my friend. Buddha was a good old boy. You can't really learn to be in the present moment, because you can't get out of the present moment. There's absolutely nowhere else to go. Pacifism is sort of an outgrowth of the practice, that you feel more peaceful and you are less prone to conflict. The only thing you can sort of learn is how to be comfortable with the fact that you are always in the present moment. And that's important. But as far as learning to be more present or whatever, everybody talks about that, you can't, because it's not something you can learn. It's like learning to breathe.